Greetings, and this is not Doctor Who Revisited or Greatest Show in the Galaxy. This is a special episode, which I suppose could be counted as a special edition of Doctor Who Revisited. Let's call it something new. Let's call it Doctor Who Ranking. This is something that I'm planning to do for as a sort of a side attachment to um, Doctor Who Revisited, and you'll have to forgive me. As you can hear, I have a bit of a sore throat. I'm a little bit under the weather at the moment, but I still decided to buckle down and get this done for the viewing public of the channel. Now, something that I wasn't really planning to do originally, but I kind of got the idea from after seeing other people do it on their YouTube channels is I'm going to rank every single episode of Doctor Who. Not in the same tier list, obviously, but I am going to rank these uh, for individual doctors. And of course, we're starting with the William Hartnell era episodes, which is why this comes at the very tail end of me finishing all the episodes in the William Hartnell era for Doctor Who Revisited. Every time I'm going to go over every single Doctor's individual seasons, individual episodes, I will be ranking them all as I see fit. Now, there are several ground rules that I want to introduce for this one. I don't do this for any tier ranking list I ever do, but I am going to stick with it for this series. Let me see if I can find a way to make me. Nope, that's not where I was aiming for. Okay, I think this works better. I'll try to play around with the perspective a little bit more. Nope, that's definitely not it. So something I want to do, and let me just show the. Nope, still not it. Okay, definitely gonna take a lot of getting used to. Okay, so if you can see, I have 5 tiers as I regularly do, but I'm only going to mainly be using 4 of them for the majority of this video, because something that I decided to add just specifically, exclusively for these Doctor Who rankings is I'm going to rank all these different episodes as I see fit along these 4 tiers right here, and at the end, I'm going to say which of those I believe is the best, which will be up here at the S tier. This is going to be something interesting, revolutionary for me, something I've never really done before, and it really would push me to my limits as far as how well I can single out a single episode. Because if you know me, I love the Hartnell era. A lot of these episodes are, in my opinion, S tier material. So it will be pretty difficult for me to decide on just one of them that I think is a cut above the rest. And as you can see here, as I always like to do, I always like to give these funny names to all the tiers. The S tier, as you can see here, is Destiny in the Stars, loosely based on the final line that the Doctor says in the very end of season 1, at the end of the Reign of Terror. Flight Through Eternity, a sort of pseudo nickname that was given to one of the seasons, and I believe was also the name of one of the episodes from The Chase. Yes, I think that's really more or less where that name came from. Turbulence, because as you probably remember, the first couple of years for the Doctor have been pretty turbulent, both on screen and off screen, and I believe it was also retroactively used as one of the many nicknames for season 3 of the William Hartnell era. Wearing a bit thin, of course, is what the Doctor says in the 10th planet around the time where he was about to get to start regenerating. And we have here, good heavens, something that the Doctor used to always exclaim at certain points. Now, obviously, Flight Through Eternity is the A tier, Turbulence is the B tier, Wearing a bit thin is the C/D tier, and of course, Good Heavens is reserved to my least favorite episodes, the F tier, if you will. Now, again, I wish there was an easier way for me to do this. Nope, now you can't even see any of the episodes. This one might be a little bit worse. Okay, keep trying to experiment with these, but most of these just give me the same exact results. So I'm just gonna go with let's see, this. I think. Let's see if I scroll up and down, you can actually see the majority of the tier list. I kind of wish I could take my box and put it right down there where you can't really, where it won't bother anyone. But I think right now, I think this is the best placement for me. And of course, I will be showing images of each individual episode that we'll be ranking, so you won't have to guess which one it is. And of course, we are starting with the one that started it all, An Unearthly Child, or on 100,000 BC, depends on who you ask. I've always personally known this episode to be 100,000 BC and not, anything else. But if you want to call it An Unearthly Child, I guess it also works. I mean, it works either way. Some people, I've definitely seen some people calling it An Unearthly Child and some people calling it 100,000 BC. For now, let's just call it as episode 1, I suppose. And of course, for clarification, I will be counting the serials as a complete package, not individual parts of these serials, which will get a lot easier as we get into some of the other Doctors, which really the serials were just part 1, part 2, part 3, and so on and so forth. Whereas in the majority of the first Doctor era, each individual part had a name to it, but at the end of the day, they were all just part of one grand serial. Sometimes here and there, you could make the argument that some parts sort of crossed into the next serial, but for the most part, they were all really self-contained within their own serialized format. So I think I've already talked enough about this idea. I mean, without this episode, we wouldn't even have the show, right? Now, it's not the best episode, clearly. It's not really a groundbreaking episode in terms of Doctor Who. But again, gotta put this in the context of this is the first. If this episode failed, we do not have the show we have today. And of course, there have been better episodes that came out after it, but this, it's the one that started it all. And in my opinion, it's a really good episode. I love it. It's a great introduction to the companions. Really good introduction. The scene where Barbara and Ian rush into the TARDIS and you see the bigger on the inside machine. And I'll admit the first half of episode 1 really takes its time. But once the Doctor shows up and you get introduced to the inside of the TARDIS and the idea, the concept of what this show is really about, it just runs straight from there, and we get to see some cavemen, and there's some social political intrigue for cavemen, obviously, taking place. And of course, the Doctor himself, not really his best just yet. He hasn't quite gotten to being the Doctor that we're familiar with, the Doctor we all know and love. That comes later, but really the Doctor's brain and the Doctor reasoning all throughout the episode is what really helps elevate that character. But really, it's mostly the companions who are really running the show for the first couple of episodes in the William Hartnell era. So I think by default, it's got to be an A tier, not really a contender for an S tier. What is a contender for an S tier, I would argue, is the next serial, The Daleks. I mean, elephant in the room. The Daleks. What can I say? It introduces the Daleks, and not only that, it does that in the best way possible. We get to see their planet. We get to see the Thals. We learn about what will later be renamed the 1,000-Year War. I think they call it the Neutronic War in this episode at the moment. But we get to see Skaro, the Dalek City. I mean, this episode, being the first to feature the Daleks, it shows us more Dalek lore than most episodes of the Daleks that came after it, including the modern series. Like this episode, it did not waste time in showing, like, say, the Time Lords in a way where they first they introduced obviously the Doctor and Susan, and then slowly they introduced the meddling monk here and there. Then you get to see the Time Lords introduced properly, fully in Troughton's final episode, but you don't really get to see too much of them and too much of Gallifrey. You get to sort of sprinkle it in over the course of the Pertwee era with the Master and some of the other Time Lords, and then you get the full blast of Gallifrey with the Deadly Assassin, and of course the Invasion of Time, and other episodes that came after it. So they really took their time introducing the Time Lords and Gallifrey. This episode drops you into Skaro at the decades after the Neutronic War, and just shows you this is the world right now. These are going to be your new baddies. You're going to love them. And I think the reason the Daleks have endured and have become the greatest villain in Doctor Who, it pays a lot. It really owes a lot to this episode being as good as it is. It's a 7-part serial, and not a single second wasted, I think. There are a lot of filler in these 7 parts, but this episode wastes no time in letting you know exactly where it stands. And the case in point, we're reaping the rewards right now. The Daleks are still the best villain in Doctor Who of all time, in my opinion, at least. Now, next is an interesting experimental one. Inside the Spaceship or Edge of Destruction. Depends again. It depends on who you ask. I've always known it as Inside the Spaceship. I think it's as boring of a title that it is, and I do think that Edge of Destruction is a better title, but I've always been more familiar with it as Inside the Spaceship. Now, this episode, of course, got a lot of controversy from this scene alone. Just the scene of seeing a teenage girl with scissors attacking an older man. That didn't really flow well with a lot of people, but either way, it is in many ways it's the first ever bottle episode of the show. Everything that happens takes place inside the TARDIS. The only 4 characters in it are the Doctor and friends and companions, I should say. And it's a great way to showcase the Doctor's distrust of humans, especially Ian and Barbara. And I think this episode features the most character development for the first Doctor out of all his other episodes. And it's a 2-parter. Allegedly, it was like I mean, there's rumors and stories that you can choose to believe if you want to, but I mean, some people say that the reason this episode exists was it was supposed to be the last. Like after the Daleks 7-parter, they were going to just film this, and that'll be the end of Doctor Who. So there are certain other people that claim that the reason this episode exists is because they didn't really have the time to take down the sets from the Daleks and prepare the sets for the next serial. So Verity Lambert just took Denny Spooner, locked him up in a room one day and told him, "You're not coming out of here until you come up with a 2-parter episode to connect between the Daleks and Marco Polo." Whichever way you want to believe, I think he did a wonderful job. This episode is all about character. And we get 5 characters in this story. The Doctor, Susan, Ian, Barbara, and the TARDIS. This is, again, still years, if not decades, before the implication that the TARDIS was actually a living, sentient creature. But in this episode, there's a lot of character development for the TARDIS itself. And for me personally, again, this is an S tier. Like, a lot of William Hartnell's first season is an S, are all S tiers -1, which we will get to. And I would even put this above the Unearthly Child. Now we get to, unfortunately, our first missing episode with Marco Polo. In my opinion, this is the best of the pure historical stories. I loved it. And I've seen it a bunch of times in its reconstructed form. I've seen it with the the colorized version, where they had several extra scenes featuring Mark Eden playing an older Marco Polo for the purposes of the reconstruction of the episode. But this episode is great, in my opinion. It features our first glimpse at a real, proper historical figure with Marco Polo himself. We also get our first, our second historical figure with the mighty Kublai Khan, which was actually one of the names of the episode. Again, white actors playing Asian characters aside, this episode, I think, really great. It's one of the biggest journeys, physical that is, taking place in the Doctor Who era at the time. Like, it really takes you step by step across Marco Polo's original journey to Cathay at the time to meet with the mighty Kublai Khan. There are certain subplots I think I could have done without, I think the Ping Cho storyline, as good of a storyline as it is, I think it was a little bit unnecessary, and it was kind of very easily dropped at the later half of the episode, you can check out my reaction, my thoughts on all these episodes on Doctor Who Revisited on this channel. But yeah, one final thing I will say about this episode is Tagana. Tagana is the quintessential Doctor Who villain, in my opinion. What a Doctor Who, a human Doctor Who villain needs to be, and he really checks all the boxes, and he makes this episode as great as it is. So this is another S tier for me. Now the question is, where do I place it? I think it's better than the Inside the Spaceship, not as good as the Daleks, the other seven-parter. But I think I really have to move on because I'm kind of wasting a lot of time talking about the episodes that I've already talked about on Doctor Who Revisited. Now, the Keys of Marinus, again, this is another S tier for me. This is another brilliant outing from the legendary Terry Nation. I wish Terry Nation did more of these non-Dalek stories because he was great whenever he only did this, and I think the Android Invasion. The Android Invasion is take it or leave it, but this is great. We get to see what Terry Nation can do when he's not writing the Daleks, and it's so creative and innovative. It's like it was Avengers Infinity War before Infinity War, in a way. Not in the sense of a massive crossover blockbuster. It's more of the chasing after the keys from one place to the other and trying to collect all 7 keys, or was it 5 keys? I can't remember. But this is great, and even the name itself pretty much tells you what the adventure is going to be. Now let's just drop you into this massive adventure and let's go. You hit the ground running and sprinting all the way to the end, and it's a really, really good and very, very creative and innovative episode. It's another S tier for me, and I think I put him above Marco Polo even. Yeah, that's how much I loved it. Now, the Aztecs. I love this episode, especially for the inner conflicts between the Doctor and Barbara. Susan was mostly a no-show in the episode, which is kind of sucks, but I loved Ian in the episode. I loved some of the villains in this episode. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record. This is another S tier for me. I love it. It's the first time you actually get to see what happens when you mess with history and like conflicts between the Doctor and companions. It's great, and I wouldn't say it's as good as Marco Polo, but it's still a really, really solid S tier episode in my opinion. There's going to be a lot of S tiers, I think, on this. A tier, because again, the S tier is reserved is for one episode in particular. We're still not quite sure which one that would be. The Sensorite. Sorry. This is, again, I love this episode. I love it. I think it's, while I'm concerned the majority of season 1 S tiers, I think this is one of the lower ones, and I think I might even put it at Turbulence, because yeah, it's really, really good, but it's not A tier material. And definitely not a contender for the much coveted S tier. And hold on, I'm gonna scroll down so you can see where I placed it. Or maybe just, you know what, let's just well, I think this one might even be my best. No, hold on. I'm back to this now, because that way you can see the whole list. And you know what? I'm really not important the list is, but yeah, the Sensorites, very solid episode. I love what happens in it, and I love the character design. I love the plot twist at the close to the end. I love the human characters in this episode. It's a really good one. And now we finally reach one that I am not a fan of in the slightest. The Reign of Terror. And again, this episode is another missing one. And it being missing really hurt this episode a lot. But even if it wasn't missing, it's a very boring episode in my opinion. And I know some of the actors loved it. A lot of the actors from that era, they just preferred the pure historical episodes over the sci-fi episodes. I'm just a sci-fi guy. What can I tell you? I love the sci-fi-ness of these episodes. So some of these episodes really aren't going to rank that high on the list for me personally. So I'm gonna put this in good heavens. Because I think the one redeeming part about the episode is Napoleon, where Napoleon shows up, and really just the final part of the episode, where all these secrets that they've been carrying all over the serial are revealed, and the final episode really elevates the rest of the serial um, a lot. But again, it's a slugfest trying to get to that final episode. Now, this is a short and sweet one, I think. Planet of Giants. I actually like this. I like Planet of Giants, as ridiculous as it is, and it sort of touches on something that we don't really get to see often, like what happens when the TARDIS doors are open mid-flight. And again, this is still very very early for Doctor Who. They weren't quite sure what they wanted the TARDIS to be as a concept in Doctor Who. So they were still playing around with what could happen when the TARDIS goes wrong. It's almost like early Star Trek, where a lot of plots from the early Star Trek episodes were just, and now the transporter has gone wrong, and this happened. You know what I'm saying? Like something was wrong with the transporter, and now there are two Captain Kirks running around, and it still sometimes happens with some of the later Star Trek episodes, but this is an early example of that, and it's also an example of what happens when something in the TARDIS goes wrong. And it's a great example of, hey, let's do an episode where the characters shrink, which is a tried and true um, trope for movies and television these days. So yeah, I'm gonna put this on the same level as the Sensorites. It's not good enough to be in the upper echelon of these episodes, but it's really really good. I really do enjoy it. Now, the Dalek invasion of Earth. This is a contender for an S tier right here. This is one of the contenders for S tier material. Like, the fact that Doctor Who, the franchise, keeps coming back to this event over and over and over and over again across multiple forms of media. It's been adapted to a big screen movie. It's been featured in audios. It's been featured in novels. Like, this episode does a lot. And you know what? As a 7-part episode, was it a 6-part episode? I can't remember. But as a full-on serial, it's amazing. I love it. We don't get as much lore of the Daleks as we did in their first outing, but we just get to see more of the Daleks being the Daleks. And just the idea and the imagery of seeing Daleks in Trafalgar Square and Westminster Bridge and all these real world locations. And again, a lot of the episodes were shot on location, and the themes in the episode was really really great. It really does feel like a Holocaust movie, just set in the future with Daleks in it and the Doctor running around. And again, just like with the previous one, there is some fluff, I would say, some filler, but I really did enjoy a lot of the extra added storylines in this episode, and I love much of you didn't get to see it though. I really like the Slither, and I like the scenes in the mining camp, and I really do enjoy the Peter Cushing take on the movie take on this story. But I think the TV version is far superior. So again, putting it at a high up in the A tier and even above the Keys of Marinus. And you know what? Screw it. I'll put it even above the Daleks debut episode. That's how much I love this episode. And now we're back to another two-parter with The Rescue. And this is another episode I really like. It's really good. I like this one. I like Coquillian / Bennett. Spoilers if you haven't seen the episode. It's a really great introduction to Vicky. Great way to sort of help both the characters and the audience decompress after the massive storyline that was the Dalek invasion of Earth. It's really good. I really like it, and the names of the episodes are the two individual episodes are also really good. Now, do I say it's as good as an A tier? It's definitely not in the conversation for qualifying for an S tier, but I think Yeah, I think I put it at turbulence, at the top of turbulence, because again, I can't really seem to find a flaw in this episode necessarily, but I wouldn't say it's as good as some of the A tier material. Now, and again, I'm sorry to do this, but this is another high up there. It's the Romans. I love this episode so much, and especially this scene, and especially this character of Caesar Nero. Again, I don't like the character of Caesar Nero in real life, but his depiction in this episode is hysterical. I love it, especially in the scene where he yells at the doctor for burning a map of Rome, which gives him the idea to burn down Rome. And I just love, as inappropriate as it is by today's standards, I love the scenes of him chasing after Barbara. And I like a lot of the subplots, not all of them, obviously, but just Nero, I think, really makes this episode for me. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I just love that the Doctor and Vicky are having their own separate thing while Ian and Barbara are having another separate thing, and they meet at the end, not knowing of each other's trials and tribulation all throughout the episode. This is contender for an S tier, but for now, I'm gonna put it between Marco Polo and the Keys of Marinus, I think. And again, I love this episode too. The Web of Fear. Sorry, not the Web of Fear. The Web Planet. Sorry, my bad. Of course, people would remember that I have certain history with the Menoptera. Let's not get into that right now. But either way, I love the Menoptera. I love the Zarbi. I love the planet Vortis. I love even the Animus. It's such a powerful villain that the Doctor and friends defeated the Animus by a fluke. Like it almost feels like they weren't even supposed to win, but they somehow edged out a victory in the last minute, which is great. I like it. I like it when Doctor Who gets these narrow escapes from time to time. So this is again, and this is another. This is an early example of an episode taking place on another planet with only aliens and no other human characters at all whatsoever. It's a great concept that I wish Doctor Who would have done a bit more. So right now it's above Keys of Marinus for me, and it might even be between the two dogs. Like, I'm sorry, I really like it. I love it. I love this episode so much. Well, what can I say? This is where it's going to get a bit controversial for me personally because we have the Crusade. Now, still to this day, I believe, first and last episode to take place in Israel, my home country. Obviously, it wasn't called Israel when the episode was taking place, or rather, when the events of the episode were taking place. It was still called the land of Palestine, but I mean, it's got Julian Glover in it. It's got Gene Marsh in it. It's a historical. It's mostly missing. I honestly don't really have much to say about this episode. This episode, like, I'm really split between the historicals I love and the historicals I'm meh about, and the historicals I don't like at all. So this is in the meh area for me. Like, there's some fun stuff in it, but overall, I'm gonna put it in wearing a bit thin. It's not. It doesn't deserve to be at the bottom of the tiers, right here, but it's also not very high on my list. And then we have the Space Museum. I think the Space Museum is a bit underrated. I don't think it gets as much love as it probably should. I mean, it's one of the first episodes that really deal with the dangers of time travel and parallel timelines, and it's a really good plot. It's one of the few rare episodes, especially from that era, that take place in on a planet in a completely different galaxy that has nothing to do with Earth. And I wish again more Doctor Who would do that, expand the universe a bit. Not every Doctor Who space story has to take place within our own galaxy, and I understand that that's where Earth is. I understand that that's where Gallifrey is. I understand that's where the Sontaran Rutan War is, but there are so many other galaxies within the Doctor Who universe, like whatever galaxy Skaro hails from. So give us more episodes like that. So it's over here for me, and I think I put it above Planet of Giants, and maybe even above the Sensorites. That's how much I really like this episode. I think we should get more love. And of course, we have the chase. The Daleks are back at it again. Now, look, it's especially in the Hartnell era. It's very very hard to miss with the Daleks. Like, you have a Dalek story, you just know you're in for something good, you know? And I think the chase really exemplifies that. And I love the mechanoids as seen in this picture. I love all the extra places they go to in this serial. I love the abandoned haunted house episode. I love the Mary Celeste joke. I love the Empire State Building with Peter Purves, even before he was Steven. As stupid and inappropriate as that character was, I just love it. I eat this stuff up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And yeah, this episode, I just love it. It's another one of those potential S tiers for me. Do I put it above the other Dalek stories? Well, it's definitely not as high as the Web Planet. I think, yeah, I think right here is a good enough spot. Like, a lot of the Terry Nation episodes are at the top for good reasons. And then we get the Time Meddler. I love the meddling monk so much. He's one of my absolute favorite characters from Doctor Who. I wish they brought him into the show a little bit more. It's unfortunate that they didn't. I love what they're doing with this character on Big Finish. I love his inclusion in the Missy series. The Meddling Monk, I don't think it's one of those characters that deserve a standalone spin-off series. It's one of those characters that really thrives as a threat in a lot of other stories as a secondary villain. I love the Seventh Doctor story that they did with him with Churchill, and yeah, I just wish that we get to see more of the Meddling Monk. And this episode really introduced him. It wasn't, I think, much as I said that I love the character, the rest of the episode, I think, if you take out the Meddling Monk, it's not as good. Now I realize that the whole episode is about him, but without the Meddling Monk, if it was just a pure historical, it wouldn't have been as good. Like, it was just a random Viking story. So I think the Meddling Monk should be at the very top of Turbulence. It has lots of really good reasons for being an A tier episode, but um, yeah, without the Meddling Monk, this episode really falls apart. Now, Galaxy 4 is an episode I'm not the biggest fan of. I love the concepts in it, and I love the message of uh, don't judge by appearances. But yeah, the fact that a lot of this episode is missing also hurts it. I love the Chumbleys. I love the Rills. Not a big fan of the Drovin. Not a big fan of Steven in this episode, or Steven in general. That's a whole side thing. But yeah, it's a meh episode for me. It's either at the bottom of Wearing a Bit Thin or at the top of Good Heavens. Um, I don't know what to do with this episode too much. I think I might put it at the top of Good Heavens because it's not bad enough to be at the bottom. I don't know. But Mission to the Unknown, though, still to this day, the only episode of Doctor Who that does not feature the Doctor in it at all to any capacity, and it's a one-off, which is very much rare in that time period of Doctor Who. This episode really works, and it shows that these episodes can work without the Doctor being in it. Unfortunately, the episode is missing entirely, and if you want to watch it properly, you got to watch the recreation with the students from the whatever name of the university that recreated the episode. They did a really good job. I wish I could have seen the episode in its full glory as it was. I love that this episode also introduces Varga plants into the ether. I wish they did a little bit more with some of these other figures from this table. We get more of them in the Daleks master plan, but I think they could have done a bit more. We introduced all these cool looking characters, and really the only thing that they do is that they look cool. And obviously, Big Finish has expanded on some of them to some capacities, but for the most part, that's really all they do. All they in the episode 4 is just to look good. So, and I love how this episode really sets up the uh, the Daleks' master plan. For now, I'd say it's up here. It's not as good as the Time Meddler, but it's a slightly better than the Rescue. And then the Myth Makers. I mean, it's a good historical. I mean, again, the fact that it's mostly missing really hurts it a lot. And not only that, it's one of the most missing episodes. Where some missing episodes have a few clips from them. This thing has next to nothing, other than that, just a short shot of Vicky leaving the TARDIS, and maybe a few other shots here and there. But overall, it's if this episode wasn't missing, I'd say it would probably rank higher for me personally. But for now, I'd say it's wearing a bit thin, but it's slightly better than the Crusade episode. Now, this is probably the ultimate contender for S tier. It's the Daleks' Master Plan, quite possibly the biggest episode Doctor Who has ever produced. A 12-part story. It's got Nicholas Courtney before he was the Brigadier. It's got a great companion in Sarah Kingdom, played by Jean Marsh again. It's got the Daleks. It's got a galaxy-trotting adventure. I mean, this episode pretty much at one point just stops focusing on the main plot to show some other main plots happening in between it. This is how massive this episode is. And I mean, like, the fact that episode 1 is literally called The Nightmare Begins, it's like already setting you up to knowing that you're in for something big and major. And it's got 2 companion deaths in it. I suppose 2.5 if you consider Brett Vian. But I mean, Mavic Chen, Yellowface aside, one of the best Doctor Who villains of all time. It's so good that even Russell T Davies is just sort of hinting that we might get to see that character again in Judy Garqua's era, which I'm all here for it. And again, we get to see more of the Daleks. The meddling monk shows up again, and I talk about how much I love that character. And just this episode is like it's an ultimate S tier material. Like I would put it up here with the Daleks Master Plan. In fact, I might even go so far as to putting it over here this early into the conversation. But we're gonna have to talk about that when we get to that. Now, from the ultimate S tier to the ultimate F tier, the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. I hate this episode. It's my least favorite Hartnell era episode and one of my least favorite episodes of all time. And I've already talked at length about why I hate this episode so much in my review on it. You can go ahead and check that out. And sucks that kind of it's sandwiched between 2 episodes I really love, like The Ark. I love this episode. I love this episode a lot. I love that all 4 episodes of this episode, all 4 parts are not missing. It's really, really good. I love this episode a lot. Not that, and it features some of my least favorite companion combos in it, but it does not matter. The strength of the episode is so great that it outshines the lackluster companion combination. And it's one of the few episodes that really shows us like the progression of time in between different parts of Doctor Who episodes, and just it's really good. I love it. I love it even more than An Unearthly Child, I would say. Maybe even above Edge of Destruction. Oh, the A tier is really, really filling out. Again, what can I say? I love the William Hartnell era. And the same thing goes for the Celestial Toymaker. I love it. It's one of those episodes where I'm like, what the hell were they thinking throwing this episode away? Why is this episode missing? Why can't we enjoy this episode as it is? Now, again, with the Celestial Toymaker, Yellowface aside, he's a really great villain, and I loved how they reused that villain in other areas of the Doctor Who universe. It's great conceptually. The set design is amazing. The costumes is really great, and even the acting, even the companions do shine in this episode, I think. And I would even put it all the way up here. Like this is probably the most stacked A tier of all time. The Gunfighters, another episode I really love. I just love almost all of the Hartnell era. Almost all of the Hartnell era is an A tier for me, and the rest is either an F tier or an S tier. That's really how I go with the William Hartnell era. In it's a great retelling of the shootout at the old K Corral. A little bit historically inaccurate at some parts, and I'm not just talking about about a Time Lord from Gallifrey running around in there with a police box, but it's a really good episode. I love it. I love the almost musical type nature of this episode, and I'm sorry to say it's another A tier for me. But slightly below the arc. And wait, hold on. Yeah, I the order was a bit wrong. The Savages. First episode to feature the episode 1, episode 2, episode 3 format and completely ditches the individual names for episodes. This episode's boring. It's annoying. It's a Steven heavy episode. It's not a good episode. I'm sorry. I don't like it. I'd say it's probably over here at the bottom. Like, I don't like Steven. What can I say? I don't like Steven Taylor as a companion. What can you say? And this, you know what? I don't want to talk about this episode. I much prefer to talk about stuff I love, like the War Machines. I love this episode. As cheesy and 60s sci-fi as it is, it's great. You can definitely tell that this is a season finale worthy episode. It's really good. I love it. It's I'm gonna go ahead and say it's my favorite of the William Hartnell season finales. And it's sort of a technicality here, but it's the best season finale for the Doctor. For William Hartnell's Doctor, it's another A tier for me, and I put it even above the arc. And it's a great introduction to Ben and Polly, two underrated companions in my opinion, but I don't much care for their next outing, which is the Smugglers. And again, it's another missing episode, so there's not much I can say about the episode itself. But story-wise, it's pretty boring. I don't like it. Um, it's it's right next to Reign of Terror and the Massacres, to some of my least favorite episodes. And now we come to the final of the William Hartnell era episodes. And if this wasn't in the middle of a season, this would have been my favorite season finale. But it's the 10th planet. I mean, it's the introduction of the Cybermen. It's the introduction of regeneration. It's Ben and Polly as companions really shine in this episode. And much like the episode that introduces the Daleks right before it, this episode doesn't just it shows you glimpses of the Cybermen. We get introduced to Mondes, their home planet, and it really just dumps you into the story as it is. In a way, it's sort of like the end of an era for the Cybermen, and this is their introduction. And even other episodes of the show have gone back to this moment in time specifically to try and recreate the former glory of this episode. And obviously, a lot of it does deal with this episode taking place in the not so distant future of humanity, which eventually got crossed over with real life when they came around to making the Sixth Doctor era. But what can I say? I love this Cyberman design. It's one of my favorite Cyberman design, right down to the stupid voice that they have, and it's so iconic that it was reused in um, um, World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, Capaldi's penultimate stories. It's great. It's a great episode, and I love it. It's another contender for that much coveted S tier position. I put it right here next to the Dalek Invasion of Earth. If the final episode wasn't missing, it might have been way higher on my list, but the fact that they stupidly threw out the last episode, the one where the Doctor actually regenerates in, it really brings that episode down a lot for me personally. But now I have to sort of rummage through this A tier pile, this massive A tier pile, and decide which episode do I elevate to S tier status. And you know what? In my opinion, there can be no question about it. This is one of the easiest decisions I'm going to have to make with these Doctor Who rankings. It's got to be the Daleks Master Plan. Like, I mean, even if it wasn't 12 parts, It's the grandiose scale of it. Even if you take out the bits in the middle where the Doctor and friends just land on various different random locations, like ancient Egypt or a new forming star. If even if you take out those episodes, the episodes where the meddling monk shows up, which I love, it's still a really good episode. Like even if you just uh, cut out the whole subplot of Earth in it and just focus on the Doctor fighting the Daleks and their alliance, it's still great. It's one of the grandiose episodes that Doctor Who has ever produced. Trying to watch all 12 parts of this serial in one go is a nightmare to pull off, but I did it anyway. And just, it's great. It's one of the best Doctor Who stories ever told, and I love it. And look at so much, there's so much lore that came from just this episode alone. 12 parts in all. Like, it cannot be beat. It cannot be topped. It's not only an S tier or rather one of the best Hartnell era episodes. It's one of the best episodes of Doctor Who of all time, as it rightfully should be remembered as. And that's it. This is my list right here. Again, apologize for so many A tiers. I just love this Doctor and this era so much that this is I have a really high opinion on a lot of the William Hartnell era episodes. Something I can definitely say with full certainty will most probably not be the same for the Patrick Troughton era. Full disclosure, even though right now I haven't even started uploading my reviews for the William Hartnell era, for the Patrick Troughton era episodes, I've already finished watching all of them, and I'm currently in the process of recording and editing all of the other reviews that I've already recorded on the Patrick Troughton era, and I will continue to upload them as the weeks go on. But that's it. That's it for now. That's it for me talking about my favorite of the classic era Doctors. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about this my ranking, and let me know how you would rank these episodes and which one do you think is the best of the William Hartnell era episode. Now I gotta go drink some tea because my throat is killing me. I have another podcast I need to do later tonight. So I thank you all and goodbye for now. Goodbye.